Chapter 1: The Child No One Wanted. The first time I saw him, I thought he was already dead. Snow had fallen all night, thick enough to swallow the narrow mountain path and silence the forest completely. Even the wind seemed reluctant to disturb the fragile white stillness. My breath fogged the air as I trudged forward, basket of herbs growing heavier with every step. I should have turned back earlier. Winter in these mountains was merciless, and dusk was approaching faster than I liked. But then I saw something dark against the snow. At first, I assumed it was a fallen branch. Then I noticed the shape was wrong. Too small, too still. My chest tightened. I set down my basket and approached carefully, boots crunching softly through the frozen crust. As I drew closer, the shape resolved into a thin bundle of torn cloth, something that might once have been a robe, now stiff with ice. And inside it, a child. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Black hair matted with frozen blood clung to his face. His skin was so pale it seemed almost blue, lips cracked and bloodless. One arm was twisted beneath him at an angle that made my stomach lurch. But what froze me in place wasn't the injuries. It was the faint, unnatural chill radiating from him. Not the cold of winter, but something deeper, heavier, as if the air itself recoiled from his presence. For one terrible moment, I wondered if he might be something not human. Then I saw his chest move. Barely, but it moved. Alive. Oh no! The words slipped out before I could stop them. I dropped to my knees beside him, snow soaking instantly through the fabric of my trousers. Carefully, I brushed the frozen hair away from his face. His eyelashes fluttered weakly, and then his eyes opened. They were not the eyes of a child. Dark. So dark they seemed to swallow the fading light, ringed faintly with a deep crimson glow that flickered like embers buried beneath ash. Not confusion. Not fear. Hatred. Raw, instinctive animal hatred, sharp enough to make my breath catch. His lips parted slightly, and a faint rasp escaped, more breath than sound. Go away. My heart broke a little. Not because he told me to leave, but because even that tiny effort clearly cost him everything he had left. You're hurt, I said softly. I'm not going to leave you here. His gaze sharpened, something feral flickering beneath the exhaustion. For a heartbeat, it felt as if the air grew heavier, pressing down on my lungs. Die, he whispered. The word carried no strength, no threat, just a grim certainty, as if death were the only outcome he understood. Not today, I replied gently. I slipped my arms beneath him as carefully as I could. He was lighter than I expected. Too light, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in a long time. For a split second, his body tensed, a faint tremor running through him. Not resistance, but instinct, like a wild animal bracing for pain. It's okay, I murmured. I've got you. His fingers twitched weakly against my sleeve. Then his head fell against my shoulder. The faint chill around him seeped through my clothes, biting against my skin, but I ignored it and gathered him closer, shielding him from the wind. Let's go home. By the time I reached the edge of the village, night had fully fallen. Lanterns glowed warmly behind shuttered windows, smoke curling from chimneys, the comforting sense of cooking drifting faintly through the cold air. Normally, the sight would have eased the ache in my bones. Tonight, dread settled in its place, because villagers noticed things, and a blood-covered child carried in someone's arms was not something easily ignored. Sure enough, the first person to spot us was old Master Chun, who had been securing the gate against the wind. He squinted through the dim light, then stiffened. Qing Yuan? What in heaven's name? He stepped closer, and saw the child, his face drained of color. Where did you find that? On the mountain path, I said. He's injured. I need to put him down. The sharpness of his tone made me blink. He'll freeze. Put him down. Something in his voice sent a cold prickle up my spine. Other villagers had begun to gather, drawn by the raised voices. Lantern light flickered across uneasy faces as they took in the scene. The blood, the torn clothes, the unnatural stillness of the boy in my arms. Then someone gasped. "Look at his eyes." Another voice trembling. "That aura. It's not human." Murmurs spread, fear sharpening into something uglier. "Demon. It has to be. Kill it before it wakes." My grip tightened instinctively. "He's a child." "That is not a child," Old Master Chun said hoarsely. "Qingyuan, listen to me. Creatures like that bring calamity. If you take it into the village, he's dying. And if he lives?" Another villager snapped. "What then? When it kills someone, will you take responsibility?" I looked down at the boy. His face had gone slack again, lashes resting against pale cheeks, breath so faint I had to feel for it. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone who had been hurt too many times to believe rescue was possible. "Yes," I said quietly. Silence fell. "If anything happens," I continued, meeting their frightened gazes, "I will take responsibility. Qingyuan. I won't let him hurt anyone." That, at least, I believed. Not because I knew what he was, but because right now he was too weak to even hold his own head up. Old Master Chun closed his eyes briefly, as if fighting an internal battle. When he opened them again, there was resignation there. And fear. "You always were too kind for your own good," he muttered. "If this brings disaster, don't say we didn't warn you." No one moved to stop me, but no one offered help either. They stepped aside, leaving a clear path. Not welcoming, not forgiving. Avoiding. My house sat at the far edge of the village, close to the forest line. Small, quiet, and usually lonely, exactly how I preferred it. Tonight, it felt like a fragile refuge against a storm I didn't understand. I kicked the door shut behind me and hurried to the low bed near the hearth, setting the boy down as gently as possible. Up close, his injuries looked worse. Bruises mottled his skin, some fresh, others fading into sickly yellow. Cuts crisscrossed his arms, not all of them clean. Some looked suspiciously like claw marks. His left shoulder was badly swollen, likely dislocated. Who had done this? Or what? "Hang on," I murmured, already reaching for clean cloths and a bowl of warm water. His skin felt unnaturally cold beneath my fingers, as if warmth struggled to stay inside his body. Even after I wrapped him in blankets, the chill lingered. I worked slowly, cleaning dried blood, binding wounds, setting the dislocated shoulder with a soft apology when his body jerked reflexively. Through it all, he didn't wake, didn't cry, didn't even whimper. Children weren't supposed to be this quiet. When I finished, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I sat back on my heels, studying his face in the flickering firelight. Without the blood and grime, he looked younger, fragile, beautiful in a sharp, almost otherworldly way. "What happened to you?" I whispered. Of course, there was no answer. I rose to prepare a thin porridge, something gentle enough for someone who hadn't eaten properly. The simple routine steadied my racing thoughts. Rescue the injured, treat the sick, feed the hungry. Those were problems I understood. Demonic children with glowing eyes were new. A faint rustle behind me made me turn. He was awake, barely. One eye cracked open, dark gaze unfocused but aware. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other across the small room. Then, slowly, he pushed himself upright. Or tried to. Pain hit him immediately, breath hitching sharply as his arms trembled under the effort. "Don't move," I said quickly, crossing the room. "Your shoulder." Before I could reach him, his hand shot out. Not fast, not strong, but desperate. He grabbed my sleeve. I froze. His fingers were ice cold, grip surprisingly tight for someone so weak. His eyes searched my face, pupils dilated, expression somewhere between panic and disbelief. "Don't," he rasped. "Don't what?" His throat worked, as if forcing the words through pain. "Leave." Something inside my chest twisted painfully. "I'm not leaving," I said gently. "I was just getting food." He stared at me as if trying to decide whether that was a lie. "Liar." The accusation was faint, almost childlike. "I promise." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, Slowly, his grip loosened, but he didn't let go entirely, fingers still clutching the fabric as if it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. "Hungry?" I asked softly. A tiny nod. I helped him sit properly, supporting his back with pillows. Up close, I could see how thin he really was, wrists narrow enough that my fingers nearly circled them completely. When I lifted the spoon to his lips, he flinched. Not from the heat, from the closeness. "It's okay," I murmured. "Just food." He hesitated, eyes flicking between the bowl and my face, suspicion warring with hunger. Finally, he opened his mouth, slowly, carefully, as if expecting pain. He ate like someone who had forgotten what it meant to be full. Small bites at first, cautious, then faster, urgency creeping in despite obvious discomfort. I slowed him gently, letting him rest between spoonfuls. Halfway through, his eyes grew heavy. "You can sleep," I said quietly. He shook his head weakly. "Stay." "I will." Only then did he allow his eyes to close. But even as sleep claimed him, his hand remained tangled in my sleeve, as if he didn't believe I would still be there when he woke. I watched him for a long time after the fire burned low. Outside, the wind howled against the walls, rattling the shutters, but inside the small house there was only quiet, broken occasionally by his shallow breathing. A demon child, they had said. A calamity waiting to happen. Maybe they were right. Maybe tomorrow would bring consequences I couldn't predict. But tonight he was just a hurt child who had asked me not to leave. Carefully, I adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. "You're safe here," I whispered, though he was already asleep. For a moment I hesitated. Then, gently, I rested my hand on his head. His hair was soft beneath my fingers, cool but no longer freezing. "Whatever you are," I murmured, "you don't have to face it alone anymore." His grip tightened in his sleep. Not painfully, just enough to let me know he was still there. Still alive. Still holding on. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, for the first time in what must have been a very long while, the demon child slept without fear. And I had no idea that this small, fragile moment, this simple decision to bring him home, would one day change the fate of the entire world. Chapter 2: Learning to be Human. When I woke the next morning, the first thing I noticed was that I couldn't move my arm. For one disoriented moment, I thought I had slept on it wrong. Then I looked down. The child was wrapped around it. Not loosely, not accidentally, clinging. At some point during the night, he had shifted closer, blankets tangled around both of us. One small hand fisted tightly in the fabric of my sleeve while his head rested against my shoulder. His breathing was shallow but steady, warm against my collarbone. He must have crawled there in his sleep. Or perhaps not entirely in his sleep. The memory of his whisper, "Don't leave," tugged painfully at my chest. Carefully, I tested moving my fingers. His grip tightened instantly. Even asleep, he noticed. "I'm still here," I murmured softly. His lashes fluttered but didn't open. Slowly, cautiously. His hold loosened just enough that I could slide my arm free without waking him fully. Except, he followed. As soon as the warmth disappeared, he shifted again, pressing closer, brow furrowing faintly as if troubled by the loss. I froze. Then, hesitantly, I rested my hand on his head. He stilled. The faint crease between his brows smoothed. Apparently that was acceptable. So I stayed there for several minutes, half sitting against the wall, one hand awkwardly buried in his hair, waiting for him to wake properly. It was strangely peaceful. Outside, morning light filtered weakly through the shutters, the storm having finally passed. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear villagers beginning their day, doors opening, voices murmuring, the dull thud of wood being chopped. Normal life, as if nothing had changed, as if there wasn't a mysterious, possibly dangerous child sleeping in my bed. Eventually, his eyes opened, dark, unfocused at first, then snapping sharply into awareness the moment he realized where he was, or who he was pressed against. He jerked back so suddenly that pain shot across his face, breath hissing through clenched teeth. "Careful," I said quickly. Your shoulder. He ignored the warning, scrambling backward until his spine hit the wall, gaze darting around the room like a trapped animal searching for an exit. Only when he confirmed there was no immediate threat did his eyes return to me. Suspicious, guarded, and beneath it, something fragile. You're still here, he said hoarsely. Of course. Silence. He studied me as if trying to detect deception. Why? It was such a small question, but it carried the weight of someone who had never been given a reason before. Because you're hurt, I said simply. And because this is my home. His gaze flicked to the door, then the windows, calculating. You didn't tell them? Tell who? The others. His lips curled faintly. The ones outside. So he had heard them last night. I didn't tell them anything they don't already suspect, I admitted. But I didn't hand you over either. A long pause. Stupid. Probably. Something like confusion crossed his face. His stomach growled loudly. We both looked down at it. A faint flush crept across his pale cheeks, the first hint of normal childhood embarrassment I had seen from him. Hungry? I asked gently. He hesitated, pride warring visibly with need. Maybe. I smiled. That sounds like a yes. He watched me warily as I prepared food, eyes tracking every movement as if memorizing escape routes. Even sitting upright seemed to exhaust him, shoulders trembling slightly from the effort. When I approached with the bowl, he stiffened. I won't poison you, I said dryly. You could. I could also have left you in the snow. That shut him up. Reluctantly, he allowed me to help him hold the bowl, fingers brushing mine for a split second before jerking away as if burned. Cold. Not normal cold. Something deeper, almost biting. He ate more slowly this time, though his eyes never left my face for long. Suspicion lingered in every movement, but hunger gradually overpowered caution. Halfway through, he paused. Why are you watching me? To make sure you don't choke. I'm not a baby. I didn't say you were. A beat. I won't choke. Good. He frowned, as if uncertain how to respond to such an unremarkable statement. When he finished, he didn't hand the bowl back. Instead, he held it awkwardly in his lap, gaze lowered, fingers tracing the rim. What? I asked. A long pause. Thank you. The words sounded unfamiliar, as if he had rarely used them before. You're welcome. He looked up sharply, searching my expression again. No mockery, no hidden demand, just simple acceptance. Something in his shoulders loosened a fraction. What's your name? I asked after a while. He went completely still. The fragile calm shattered instantly. Don't have one. My heart squeezed painfully. Everyone has a name. Not me. The flat certainty in his tone left no room for argument. Would you like one? I asked gently. Suspicion flared again. Why? So I know what to call you. Silence stretched. Then, almost inaudibly, anything. I studied him for a moment. Dark hair, dark eyes, that strange, faint aura like cold smoke curling invisibly around him. Dangerous, lonely, beautiful in a sharp, unearthly way. Mingshen, I said softly. He blinked. What does that mean? Bright darkness, I replied. Light hidden in shadow. He repeated it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. Mingshen. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but not emptiness either. Mine? He asked uncertainly. Yes, if you want it. Another long pause. Then very quietly, I want it. All right? I said, smiling. Then Mingshen it is. He lowered his gaze again, fingers tightening around the blanket. Lin Qingyuan, I added. His head snapped up. What? My name. He stared at me as if the concept were foreign. You're telling me? That's usually how introductions work. Why? I huffed a small laugh. Because we're going to be living in the same house. And it would be awkward if you kept calling me, hey you. Qingyuan, he repeated slowly. Hearing my name in that small, uncertain voice did something strange to my chest. The rest of the morning passed quietly. He watched everything. how I moved around the kitchen, how I tended the fire, how I sorted herbs. At first, I assumed it was simple curiosity. Then I realized something unsettling. He wasn't just watching. He was memorizing. Every gesture, every habit, every sound. Like survival depended on it. When I finally stepped outside to fetch water, I hesitated at the door. "You'll be all right for a few minutes?" I asked. His expression went blank. "You're leaving. Just to the well. I'll be right back." His hands clenched in the blankets. "Don't." My heart twisted again. "I have to, but I promise I'll come back." Silence. Then grudgingly, "Fast. I'll be very fast." I returned less than 5 minutes later. The door was open. Panic surged through me until I saw him. Standing just outside the threshold, swaying slightly from weakness, eyes fixed on the path as if prepared to run after me. Relief flooded his face the moment he saw me. "You took too long." It was 5 minutes. Too long. He collapsed back inside as soon as I set the bucket down, clearly having pushed himself far beyond his limits. "You shouldn't be standing yet," I scolded gently, helping him back to bed. "Had to make sure," he muttered. "Make sure of what?" "That you came back." Something inside me cracked open completely. "I told you I would. People lie. I won't." He studied me for a long moment. "If you do," he said quietly, "I'll find you." There was no childish petulance in the statement. No exaggeration. Just calm certainty. For reasons I couldn't explain, a chill ran down my spine. That night, he fell asleep faster. Closer. Curled toward me like a small animal seeking warmth. And when I shifted slightly, his hand found my sleeve again without waking, fingers hooking into the fabric as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I didn't move away. Days passed. His injuries began to heal, though the unnatural cold around him never fully disappeared. Sometimes I would catch frost forming faintly on the rim of a water cup he had touched. Other times, shadows in the room seemed to deepen when he was upset. I pretended not to notice. If he wanted to tell me what he was, he would. If not, forcing him wouldn't help. He learned quickly. Too quickly. Within a week, he could speak in full sentences, though he still preferred silence. He followed me everywhere I allowed, watching, absorbing, occasionally asking blunt, unsettling questions. Why do people smile when they're unhappy? Why do they pretend not to be afraid? Why did they want to kill me? That last one nearly broke me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he sat beside me on the floor, carefully sorting dried herbs under my supervision. His movements were precise, delicate, far too controlled for a child. "Qing Yuan," he said suddenly. "Yes." A pause. "Are you afraid of me?" The question was quiet, vulnerable. I set down the herbs and looked at him properly. "No." He searched my face, clearly expecting to find a lie. "Why not?" "Because you haven't given me a reason to be." Silence stretched. Then, almost inaudibly, "I could. I know." His hands stilled. "And you'd still stay?" "Yes." For a long time, he didn't speak. Then, very carefully, as if testing something fragile, he leaned sideways until his shoulder brushed mine. Not clinging, not demanding, just touching. I didn't pull away. After several seconds, I felt the faint pressure increase. His head resting lightly against my arm. Warm breath ghosted against my sleeve. "Good," he whispered. Outside, the world remained wary. Inside, something fragile and extraordinary was taking root. Trust, slow and stubborn, growing in the quiet space between fear and kindness. I didn't know what Mingshen truly was. I didn't know why he had been abandoned, hunted, or left to die in the snow. But one thing had become painfully clear. He wasn't just afraid of the world. He was afraid of losing the one place where he finally felt safe. And without realizing it, I had already become that place. Chapter 3: The Monster Awakens. Winter did not leave quietly that year. Even as the snow began to melt, the air carried a sharpness that lingered in the bones, as if the mountains themselves were reluctant to release their grip on the land. The forest dripped steadily during the day, only to freeze again at night, turning every branch into glass. Mingshen healed faster than any child should. Within 2 weeks, he could walk without swaying. Within 3, the bruises had faded, the cuts reduced to faint silver lines across pale skin. His dislocated shoulder regained full movement with unsettling ease, as if his body simply refused to remain broken. I told myself it was a blessing. I tried not to wonder what it meant. He had also grown quieter, not withdrawn. He still followed me everywhere, still hovered at my side while I worked, still insisted on sitting close enough that our sleeves brushed. But there was a new tension coiled beneath the surface. Alertness, like a predator sensing something beyond human perception. Sometimes, I would catch him staring toward the forest, eyes narrowed, head tilted slightly as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear. "What is it?" I asked once. "Nothing." The answer came too quickly. The villagers avoided my house more than ever. Where once I had received occasional visits for herbs or simple company, now people left offerings at the gate and departed without knocking. Children who used to wave from the road were pulled away by anxious parents. Rumors had spread. I didn't know exactly what they said, but I could guess. Strange child. Unnatural aura. Calamity waiting to happen. Mingshen noticed too. One afternoon, he stood by the window, watching a pair of women hurry past with their heads down. "They're afraid," he said flatly. I didn't deny it. "Yes." Silence. "Good." I looked up sharply. He wasn't smiling. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only something cold. "They won't try to take me if they're afraid," he added. My chest tightened. "No one is taking you anywhere." For a moment his gaze softened. "Promise." "I promise." That night, the unease that had been building finally took shape. I woke to the sound of voices outside, not the casual murmurs of neighbors passing by. Low, urgent, angry. Mingshen was already awake. He sat upright beside the bed, completely still, eyes fixed on the door. In the faint moonlight, his pupils looked enormous, swallowing the irises entirely. "Stay behind me," he said. The calm authority in his voice sent a chill through me. "Mingshen, stay." Before I could argue, a heavy knock rattled the door. "Lin Qingyuan," someone shouted. "Open up." Recognition flickered through my mind. Village Chief Zhao. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a social visit. I rose slowly, placing a hand on Mingshuan's shoulder as I passed. "It's all right," I murmured. "Let me talk to them." His fingers caught my sleeve instantly. "Don't go. I'll be right here." "No." His grip tightened, nails digging into the fabric. "They want me." Another knock, louder this time. "Open the door, Qingyuan. We know it's in there." My pulse spiked. "Stay in the back room," I said quietly. Mingshen shook his head. "If they try to hurt you." His eyes darkened, something ancient and furious flickering beneath the surface. "I won't stop." I swallowed hard. "Please," I said softly. "Trust me." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, reluctantly, his fingers loosened. But he didn't retreat far, just enough to be out of immediate sight, gaze still locked on me like a tether. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke. 5 men stood outside, armed not with farming tools but with actual weapons. Spears, swords, a hunting crossbow. Village Chief Zhao stepped forward, face grim. "Qingyuan," he said. "We need to talk." My eyes flicked to the weapons. At this hour? We wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. Behind him, one of the men spat on the ground. "We've tolerated this long enough," he muttered. "That thing is bringing misfortune." Chief Zhao raised a hand, though he didn't contradict the sentiment. "Strange things have been happening," he said carefully. "Livestock found frozen solid. Tracks in the forest that don't belong to any animal we know. And," his gaze sharpened, "children have been having nightmares." My stomach twisted. "You think that's his fault?" "We think he isn't human." Silence stretched between us. "Even if he isn't," I said finally, He hasn't hurt anyone. Yet, someone snapped. We can't wait for a tragedy, another added. If he grows stronger. He's a child. Monsters start small too. A cold prickle crawled up my spine. Not from their words. From the sudden drop in temperature behind me. The air inside the house had grown noticeably colder. Chief Zhao noticed. His expression tightened. He's listening, isn't he? I didn't answer. Qingyuan, he said quietly, almost pleading now. Step aside. Let us take him. If he truly means no harm, the traveling cultivators passing through next month will confirm it. And if they don't, his tone implied, we'll deal with it. My hands curled into fists. No! Murmurs of anger rippled through the group. Don't be foolish. You're risking everyone. We can't allow this. A soft sound came from behind me, bare feet on wood. Slow. Deliberate. Every man outside went rigid. Mingshen stepped into view. He wasn't trembling. Wasn't hiding. He walked forward until he stood just behind my shoulder. One small hand gripping the back of my sleeve. Possessive. Claiming. The reaction was immediate. Several men recoiled. One raised his weapon instinctively. Don't! I snapped. But Mingshen wasn't looking at them. His gaze was fixed on Chief Zhao. Completely expressionless. You want me to go with you, he said. His voice was soft. Too soft. Chief Zhao swallowed. Yes. Silence. If I refuse? The temperature dropped further. Frost began to creep along the doorframe. You're not leaving, I said firmly. Mingshuan's fingers tightened in my sleeve. They're afraid, he murmured. I know. If they keep being afraid. Something in his voice changed. Deepened. They'll keep trying to take me. I turned toward him fully. Mingshen. His eyes met mine. And for a split second, I saw the child he was trying so hard not to be. I don't want to hurt them, he whispered. But I don't want to leave you. My throat closed. You won't, I said. I won't let them take you. Behind us, someone shouted, do something before it attacks. Another man raised his spear. Everything happened at once. Mingshen moved. Not fast in the way a child runs. Fast in the way lightning strikes. One moment he was behind me. The next, he stood between me and the weapon. Eyes blazing with a deep, unnatural crimson. The spear stopped mid-air. Not because the man halted. Because it couldn't move. A thin layer of black frost crawled up the shaft, spreading with horrifying speed until the wood cracked and splintered apart, shattering into glittering shards that fell uselessly to the ground. The man screamed, stumbling backward. The air howled. Wind slammed outward from Mingshen in a violent burst, extinguishing lanterns and sending snow and debris spiraling into the darkness. Shadows pooled around his feet like liquid night. His hair lifted as if caught in an unseen current, eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. Not a child. Not human. Something ancient wearing a child's shape. Leave, he said. The word vibrated through the air like distant thunder. No one moved. Frost spread across the ground, creeping toward the men's boots, crackling ominously. I said leave. Chief Zhao grabbed the nearest man's arm. Go, he hissed. Now. Panic broke the paralysis. They fled, stumbling, tripping, abandoning weapons in their haste to escape the unnatural terror radiating from the small figure in the doorway. Within seconds, the path was empty, silent. But Mingshen didn't relax. The shadows still writhed around him, dark energy pulsing erratically, as if he were barely containing something vast and furious. Mingshen, I said carefully. No response. Mingshen, it's over. His head turned slowly. Those glowing eyes locked onto me. For one terrifying heartbeat, I wasn't sure he recognized me at all. Something inside him had surfaced. Something far older and far less forgiving than a frightened child. Qingyuan, he said. The voice sounded wrong, layered, echoing faintly, as if another presence spoke beneath it. Yes, I said, forcing calm into my tone. I'm here. He stared at me, confusion flickering across his face. Then the shadows surged violently. His body swayed, and suddenly he collapsed forward. I caught him just before he hit the ground. The cold that poured off him was intense enough to make my hands ache, but I held on, pulling him close. Mingshen, no answer. His eyes had closed, lashes stark against his pale cheeks, breath shallow and uneven, unconscious. Inside, I carried him back to the bed, wrapping blankets tightly around his small frame. Frost still clung to his hair, melting slowly in the warmth of the room. What had that been? Power. Raw, overwhelming power, unleashed by fear, or by the threat of losing me. After several minutes, he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused. Qing Yuan. I'm here. Relief flooded his face instantly, so intense it hurt to see. Did I hurt you? No. Anyone else? They left. He went very still. I didn't mean to. I know. His fingers twisted in the blanket. You're afraid now. It wasn't a question. I reached out and brushed damp hair from his forehead. No. His eyes widened slightly. But you saw. Yes. Silence stretched. I'm a monster, he whispered. Something sharp pierced my chest. You're a child who protected himself. I could have killed them. But you didn't. His lips trembled faintly. I wanted to. Honesty. Raw and frightening. I cupped his cheek gently, forcing him to meet my gaze. Mingshen, listen to me. He froze. You are not alone, I said softly. Whatever you are, whatever power you have, we'll figure it out together. His eyes filled with something bright and fragile. You're not going to send me away? Never. He stared at me for a long time. Then, very slowly, he leaned forward until his forehead pressed against my shoulder, small hands clutching the fabric of my robe like a lifeline. I was scared, he admitted in a tiny voice. I know. Not of them. His grip tightened. Of losing you. My arms wrapped around him before I could think. He was cold, shaking, not from power this time, but from something far more human. Fear. You won't lose me, I murmured into his hair. A long pause. Then, almost too quiet to hear. Promise. I promise. Outside, the night had fallen silent again. But nothing would ever be the same. The village had seen what Mingshen truly was. Fear would grow. Suspicion would harden into hostility. And sooner or later, someone stronger than frightened villagers would come looking for the monster child who wielded darkness like a weapon. But as he clung to me, trembling and exhausted, there was only one thing that mattered. He wasn't a calamity. He wasn't a demon. He was a terrified child who had lashed out to protect the only person who had ever shown him kindness. And I would not abandon him, no matter what came next. Chapter 4. The day the sky fell. Spring arrived too quickly. Snow vanished in muddy patches. Streams swelled with meltwater. And the first fragile green shoots pushed through the earth as if nothing had happened. Birds returned. Farmers resumed their routines. Smoke rose peacefully from chimneys each evening. But peace did not return to our house. The village kept its distance. No one came to the door anymore, not even to leave offerings. When I went to the market, conversations died the moment I approached. People avoided eye contact. Mothers pulled children behind them like shields. Some stared openly at the frost that still lingered on the edges of my sleeves no matter how warm the day. Word had spread. Not rumor anymore. Truth. Mingshen noticed everything. Of course he did. He always walked beside me now, never wandering even a step ahead like before. His hand hovered near my sleeve as if ready to grab it at any moment, though he tried not to make the gesture obvious. One afternoon, as we walked back from the well, he finally spoke. Are you angry at me? The question came out quietly but not cautiously, like he'd been holding it in for days. I stopped. Angry? Why would I be angry? He didn't look at me. They're scared because of what I did. His fingers twisted together, knuckles pale. You can't talk to people like before. They look at you like you're dangerous too. My chest tightened. That's not your fault. But it happened because of me. Mingshen. He finally glanced up, eyes uncertain, searching. If I hadn't been here, he continued, voice unsteady, you wouldn't be alone now. I crouched in front of him before he could look away again. You think I'd rather you disappear so people would like me more? He froze. Wouldn't you? No. The answer came instantly. Not even a little. His eyes widened, surprise flickering across his face. But humans need other humans, he said slowly, like repeating something he'd learned. You can't just live with a monster. You're not a monster. I froze a weapon in midair. You protected us. I scared them. They were trying to hurt you. Silence stretched. A breeze lifted strands of his dark hair across his face. For once, he didn't brush them away. I don't understand humans, he admitted. If something is dangerous, shouldn't you get rid of it? That's one way to think about it. Isn't it the correct way? I studied him carefully. No, I said softly. Not always. He frowned. Why? Because sometimes? I said, reaching out to smooth his hair back. Something dangerous is also something precious. His breath caught slightly at the touch. Precious. Yes. To you. To me. He stared at me like I just said something impossible. Even though I could hurt you? You haven't. But I might. So might anyone. He blinked, clearly not expecting that. Humans hurt each other all the time, I continued. Accidentally. On purpose. Out of fear. Out of anger. Being dangerous doesn't make you unworthy of care. His eyes grew suspiciously bright. You're strange. I laughed softly. I've been told that. But I don't dislike it. For a moment, the heaviness lifted. He hesitated, then slowly, very slowly, slipped his hand into mine. Not clinging. Not desperate. Just holding. Warmth spread through my chest. If they come again, he said after a while, I'll try not to scare them. I squeezed his fingers gently. You don't have to do that. But I don't want you to suffer because of me. I'm not suffering. You're lonely. I didn't answer immediately, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I was lonely before you came, I admitted at last. His head snapped up. But you lived here your whole life. And most of that time I lived alone. He processed that slowly. Then we were both alone, he said. Yes. Another pause. Are you still lonely now? I smiled. No. His shoulders relaxed. Just a little. Good. That night, for the first time since the incident, Mingshen fell asleep without waking repeatedly. He slept deeply, curled on his side facing me, one hand resting loosely against my sleeve as if needing only minimal reassurance that I was still there. I stayed awake longer than usual, listening to his breathing. Something felt wrong. Not immediate danger. Not obvious threat. Just the sense of pressure building somewhere far away. The sky split open at dawn. A thunderous boom shook the entire village, rattling windows and sending birds exploding into flight. I bolted upright. Mingshen did too, eyes wide and instantly alert. What was that? Before I could answer, a second explosion echoed. Not sound alone, but force, like the air itself had been struck. Outside, people screamed. We ran to the door together and stopped dead. High above the village, streaks of light tore across the sky. Brilliant, unnatural arcs of gold and white that left burning trails in their wake. Cultivators. Powerful ones. Mingshen's grip on my sleeve tightened painfully. They found me. The words came out hollow, cold, resigned. A third streak descended, slower this time, until it hovered above the village square like a miniature sun. Figures stepped out of the light, robes flowing, weapons gleaming, expressions carved from stone. Even from this distance, I could feel the pressure of their presence. Heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Not villagers, not travelers, hunters. Mingshen began to tremble, not with fear alone, with fury. They're going to take me, he whispered. No, I said immediately, though my heart was pounding. They always do. Not this time. He turned to me, eyes shining with something close to panic. You don't understand, he said, voice breaking. People like them don't ask. They decide. Then we'll talk to them. Talk? You can't negotiate with people who came prepared to kill. My stomach dropped. Kill? If they think I'm a threat, they won't risk letting me live. His nails dug into my sleeve. You should stay inside. What? No. If you're not with me, they might ignore you. I'm not abandoning you. His composure shattered. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. He burst out, louder than I'd ever heard him speak. The raw desperation in his voice made my chest ache. Mingshen, I said firmly, grabbing his shoulders. We face this together, I said. Do you understand? Why? He demanded hoarsely. Why are you still choosing me? Because you're a child. Because you're alone. Because you need someone. Because I can't bear the thought of you facing this by yourself. But what came out was simpler. Because you matter to me. His breath hitched violently. Even now. Especially now. Tears gathered in his eyes, though he fought them fiercely. I don't want to leave you, he whispered. You won't. If they force me, then I'll come get you. You don't even know where they'd take me. Then I'll find out. He stared at me like he couldn't decide whether to believe me or break down completely. You can't promise that, he said weakly. I just did. A shockwave rolled through the village. Closer this time. A voice rang out, amplified by power. Entity of demonic origin. Reveal yourself. The words vibrated in the air like a command from the heavens. Mingshen flinched as if struck. They're calling me, he said numbly. My grip tightened on his shoulders. You don't have to go. If I don't, they'll start destroying things until I do. Another explosion punctuated his words. A storage shed at the edge of the village collapsing in a plume of dust. Screams followed. His face crumpled. I can't let them hurt everyone. He looked at me with heartbreaking intensity. Stay here, he said softly. No, please. If you come, they might hurt you to control me. I don't care. I care. Silence fell between us, thick and trembling. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. Tightly, desperately, like someone clinging to the last solid thing in a collapsing world. I was happy here, he murmured into my shoulder. For the first time, my arms came up around him automatically. You can be happy again. Not without you. Another boom shook the ground. Dust fell from the roof beams. Time was running out. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes were red, not glowing with power, red with tears. If they take me, he said, voice shaking, don't forget me. My heart felt like it stopped. Don't say that. I need to know you won't. I won't. He hesitated, then did something completely unexpected. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against mine. A child's gesture. Trusting. Intimate. Fragile. I'll come back, he whispered, lips trembling. I promise. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Each step slow. Heavy. Final. I grabbed his wrist. You're not going alone. He didn't turn around. If you come, I might not be able to control myself. His voice cracked. Thank you for choosing me. And then he stepped outside. Into the light. Into the waiting hunters. Into the moment that would change everything. Chapter 5 taken. The village square looked like the center of a storm. Dust swirled in restless circles, lifted by currents of power that hummed through the air like invisible lightning. Roof tiles rattled. Wooden signposts creaked. Chickens and dogs had long since fled, leaving the place eerily empty except for the villagers clustered at the edges, watching, whispering, too afraid to come closer. At the center stood 3 cultivators. Not travelers. Not wandering disciples. These were elites. Their robes were woven with spirit thread that shimmered faintly even in daylight, embroidered with sigils that pulsed like sleeping embers. Each carried a weapon that radiated quiet menace, not ostentatious but undeniably lethal. And all 3 were staring directly at Mingshen. I stayed half a step behind him, close enough to reach him if he stumbled, far enough not to look like I was shielding him. My pulse thundered so loudly I wondered if they could hear it. Mingshen, on the other hand, stood perfectly still. Too still. The wind tugged at his hair and sleeves, but his body didn't sway at all, as if rooted to the ground. One of the cultivators stepped forward, a tall man with sharp features and a gaze that felt like a blade pressed lightly against the throat. "So," he said, voice calm but carrying effortlessly across the square. "The demonic entity chooses to reveal itself without resistance. Sensible." Mingshen didn't answer. His hands hung at his sides, fingers slightly curled, knuckles pale. "I am elder son of the Azure Radiance sect," the man continued. "You have been identified as a destabilizing presence in this region. Your energy signature matches records associated with high-risk demonic phenomena." His tone suggested he might as well be discussing weather patterns. No anger, no compassion, just assessment. Mingshen spoke at last. "I haven't hurt anyone." His voice sounded smaller than usual, almost swallowed by the vastness of the square. Elder Son tilted his head slightly. "That remains to be seen. I protected myself. From farmers with farming tools?" A faint tremor ran through Mingshuan's shoulders. "They came at night," he said, a thread of heat entering his voice. "With weapons. They feared you. Fear doesn't make it right." "No," Elder Son agreed mildly. "But fear often reveals truth." I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "He's a child," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He hasn't harmed anyone here. If you're concerned, observe him instead of treating him like an enemy." 3 pairs of eyes shifted to me. The pressure intensified immediately, like the air had grown heavier. Elder Son studied me with detached curiosity. "And you are Lin Qingyuan, the caretaker." The way he said it made the word sound temporary, incidental. "You're aware of what he is?" he asked. "I'm aware that he's been alone and frightened," I replied, "and that he hasn't chosen any of this." That was not the question. Mingshen moved slightly, positioning himself a fraction closer to me without looking back. Protective or possessive, it was hard to tell. Elder Son noticed. His gaze sharpened. "Attachment complicates matters," he said. "Demonic entities are prone to imprinting behaviors." "I'm not an animal," Mingshen snapped. The temperature dropped several degrees. The 2 cultivators behind Elder Son shifted subtly, hands lowering toward their weapons. "Careful," one warned. Mingshuan's eyes flashed darkly, but he forced himself still again, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles stood out beneath his skin. Elder Son raised a hand, stopping his companions. "Control," he said calmly. "Encouraging, encouraging," as if Mingshen were a training exercise. "We did not come to execute you," Elder Son continued. "If destruction were our goal, the village would already be ash." A ripple of fear passed through the onlookers. "Then why are you here?" I demanded. "To determine whether containment is necessary." Mingshen went rigid. "Containment," he repeated. "Yes. Meaning prison. Meaning supervision," Elder Son corrected. "Preferably in a controlled sect environment, where your development can be monitored. Like a weapon locked in storage," Mingshen said quietly. Elder Son didn't deny it. My stomach twisted. "You can't just take him," I said. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Mingshuan's hands trembled once, violently, before he forced them still. "I don't want to go with you." Power surged outward like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. Dust lifted. Pebbles rattled across the ground. Villagers cried out and stumbled backward. The 2 junior cultivators drew their weapons in one fluid motion, blades gleaming with spirit light. Elder Son didn't move. "Child," he said, voice still maddeningly calm. "You misunderstand your position." Mingshen looked up, and for the first time since we arrived, his fear burned away completely, replaced by something far colder. "You misunderstand mine," he said. Shadows bled outward from his feet, staining the ground like spilled ink. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Mingshen," I said quietly. "Don't." He didn't look at me, "They won't stop," he said, voice low enough that only I could hear. "Not until they get what they came for." The ground cracked. Thin lines spiderwebbed outward beneath him, dark frost spreading along their edges. Wind screamed through the square, whipping cloaks and hair into chaos. The junior cultivators lunged. They moved faster than human eyes should follow, blurs of white and gold converging on the small figure at the center. Mingshen didn't dodge. He raised one hand. Time seemed to hesitate. The air thickened, turning viscous, heavy, almost visible. The blades stopped inches from his skin, caught in an invisible grip. Not blocked, frozen. Both attackers struggled, faces straining, veins standing out along their necks as they poured power into their weapons. Nothing moved, not even a hair on Mingshen's head. "Go away," he said softly. The weapons shattered. Not snapped, not knocked aside. Shattered into glittering fragments that fell like lethal snow. The shockwave that followed through both cultivators backward, slamming them into the ground hard enough to crack stone. Villagers screamed and scattered. Elder Sun's expression changed for the first time. Not fear, not anger, interest. "Fascinating," he murmured. Mingshen swayed slightly. The display had cost him. I stepped forward instinctively, but stopped when shadows lashed outward in agitation, carving deep gouges into the dirt. He wasn't in control. Not fully. "Enough," Elder Sun said, finally moving. Power radiated from him in a smooth, controlled wave. Not explosive like Mingshen's, but vast, steady, overwhelming. The shadows recoiled as if burned, hissing back toward their source. Mingshen gasped, dropping to one knee. "Your strength is considerable," Elder Sun said, "but undisciplined." He extended one hand. Golden light formed intricate chains in midair, not metal, but pure energy woven into symbols that hummed with authority. "Resist, and you will suffer unnecessarily." I couldn't stay back anymore. "Stop," I shouted, rushing forward. "He's exhausted. Can't you see that?" Elder Sun's gaze flicked to me, mildly annoyed. "Remove the civilian." An unseen force slammed into me like a wall. I hit the ground hard, breath knocked from my lungs, limbs refusing to respond. "Mingshen," I choked. His head snapped toward me, panic flaring across his face. "Qing Yuan." The golden chains shot forward. They wrapped around his wrists, torso, ankles in a heartbeat, tightening with a sound like ringing bells. He cried out. Not loud, but sharp, shocked, as if the light itself burned. "Stop hurting him." I struggled against the invisible pressure pinning me down. "He's not fighting anymore. Pain encourages compliance," Elder Sun replied coolly. Mingshen sagged, trembling violently. Teeth clenched so hard a thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. He looked smaller suddenly, fragile, a child again. "Don't," he whispered, though whether to them or to me I couldn't tell. His eyes found mine. Fear flooded them, not for himself. For me. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. Something inside my chest tore. "No," I said hoarsely. "Don't apologize. This isn't your fault." The chains tightened. He gasped, body arching slightly as light flared along the bindings. "Transport formation ready," one of the injured cultivators reported, struggling to his feet. Panic surged through me, wild and useless. "You can't take him like this," I shouted. "He hasn't even had a chance to live." Elder Sun regarded me with distant patience. "That is precisely why he must be contained." A circle of light ignited beneath Mingshen's feet, complex runes spiraling outward, humming with gathering power. Wind howled inward toward the formation, tugging at clothes and hair. Mingshen looked at me again. Really looked, as if memorizing every detail. His lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then, barely audible over the rising roar, "Don't forget me." The light exploded upward, blinding, deafening, and when it faded, he was gone. Silence crashed down over the square. No shadows, no chains, no child. just scorched earth where the formation had been. Something inside me collapsed in on itself. I didn't realize I had managed to crawl forward until my hands touched the still warm ground at the center of the circle. Empty. Completely empty. Behind me, the cultivators were already preparing to depart, discussing logistics as if they had merely completed a routine task. I couldn't hear the words, only a dull rushing sound, like blood pounding in my ears. They took him, just like that. No chance to protect him. No chance to follow. No way to know where. The sky above the village was painfully blue, clear, peaceful, as if nothing catastrophic had just occurred. My fingers dug into the dirt, nails breaking. "I'm coming for you," I whispered, voice raw and shaking. "No matter where they take you, I will find you." The wind carried the words away, but I meant them, with everything I had left. Chapter 6: The One Who Came Back. 5 years passed. Not gently, not quietly. 5 years carved their mark into everything. The village, the land, and most of all, the person I had once been. The house at the edge of the forest still stood, though the roof had been repaired twice and the fence replaced entirely. Ivy had begun creeping along the outer walls, softening the weathered wood. The herb garden had expanded, filling most of the yard in careful rows of green and silver. On the surface, life looked peaceful, predictable, ordinary, but nothing inside me had settled. People had started speaking to me again, carefully at first, as if approaching a wounded animal that might bolt or bite. Over time, necessity overcame discomfort. Illness didn't care about superstition, and I remained the only person in the region with reliable medicinal knowledge. They thanked me, they paid fairly, but they never stayed long, and no one ever mentioned the day the sky tore open. At night, when the village fell silent, I sometimes walked to the square and stood at the place where the formation circle had burned into the earth. The marks were gone now. Rain and wind had erased them years ago, but I remembered exactly where it had been. I always did. That evening, the air felt heavy. Not storm-heavy. Something else. The kind of pressure that makes animals restless and birds fall silent long before danger becomes visible. I paused while gathering herbs, hand hovering over a cluster of moonleaf, and looked toward the mountains. "You feel it too, don't you?" I murmured. The wind answered with a low, uneasy rustle. It had started a month ago. Small disturbances at first. Unseasonal frost appearing overnight on high ground. Strange shadows moving in places where light should have reached. Travelers reporting sightings of something vast passing through remote valleys, leaving silence in its wake. No one agreed on details, only on one thing: something powerful had entered the region. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Powerful beings moved through the world all the time. Not everything had to do with him. Not everything. A sharp crack split the air. I straightened instantly. The sound hadn't come from nearby trees or falling branches. It had come from above. Clouds churned unnaturally, twisting into a dark spiral that seemed to pull light inward rather than reflect it. Wind surged outward in violent bursts, bending treetops and sending leaves spiraling into the sky. Birds exploded from the forest canopy in a chaotic wave. My pulse spiked. Not fear. Recognition. "No," I whispered. Not hope. Hope had been dangerous for years. Hope had teeth. The spiral tightened. Darkness condensed at its center, swallowing sunlight until a hole of pure shadow hung in the sky like an open wound. Villagers began shouting in the distance. Doors slammed. Children cried. Something moved inside the darkness. Not falling. Not flying. Descending with deliberate, terrifying control. When it emerged fully, the world seemed to hold its breath. A figure clothed in black. Long robes that flowed like liquid night, embroidered with patterns so dark they swallowed light. Hair, equally black, streamed behind him in the violent wind, catching glints of silver like starlight trapped in shadow. He didn't land immediately. He hovered several meters above the ground, surveying the land below with a stillness that radiated absolute authority. Predatory, ancient, unreachable. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. There was something familiar about the shape of his face, the line of his jaw, the way his gaze moved across the landscape as if cataloging every threat within miles. But it couldn't be. His eyes found me, across the entire clearing, as if I were the only living thing in the world. The impact was physical. A sudden tightening in my chest, breath catching painfully as recognition slammed into me with brutal force. Not because he looked the same. He didn't. The child I remembered was gone. In his place stood something breathtaking and terrifying. Tall, broad-shouldered, radiating power so dense the air around him shimmered. But the eyes, those eyes were unchanged, dark, intense, focused on me with an emotion so raw it stripped away the years in a single heartbeat. He dropped from the sky, not falling, descending like a blade lowered toward its target. The ground cracked beneath his feet when he landed, fissures spreading outward in jagged lines before sealing again as if the earth itself didn't dare remain broken in his presence. Wind died instantly. Silence crashed down. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring. My throat felt dry. Mingshen, the name slipped out before I could stop it. His expression shattered. Not visibly, not in a way most people would notice. But I saw it, the subtle tremor in his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw, the way his hands curled slowly into fists as if holding himself together by force alone. "You remember me," he said. His voice was deep now, low, carrying a resonance that vibrated through the air like distant thunder. But beneath it, unmistakable, was the echo of the boy who had once clung to my sleeve. "Of course I remember you," I said, heart racing. "How could I ever forget?" A sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh, not quite a breath, sharp and uneven. He took one step forward. I realized then how much taller he had become. He towered over me now, presence overwhelming, shadow falling across the ground like something alive. "I thought about this moment every day," he said quietly. "What I would say when I saw you again." "What you would say?" "Yes." His gaze searched my face with almost painful intensity. I didn't expect to forget all of it. Something in my chest tightened. "You don't have to say anything," I said gently. "You came back. That's enough." His eyes darkened instantly. "No," he said. "It isn't." Before I could react, he closed the distance completely. One hand came up, large, calloused, trembling slightly, and stopped just short of my face, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch me. The hesitation hurt more than any wound. "May I?" he asked. The question was so unexpected I forgot to breathe. "You don't need permission," I said softly. His restraint snapped. His hand slid against my cheek, warm despite the cold aura surrounding him, thumb brushing along my jaw as if verifying I was real. The touch was careful, reverent, but beneath it, I could feel the strength coiled in his fingers, enough to crush bone if he chose. He didn't. "You're exactly the same," he murmured, voice rough. "Not a day older. Not a single line changed. Cultivator longevity." I had almost forgotten how strange it must seem. "And you?" I exhaled shakily. "You grew up." Something like pain flashed across his face. I had to. His thumb paused near the corner of my mouth. "You weren't there." Guilt twisted through me. "I tried to find you," I said. "I just didn't know where to look." "I know. You do." His lips curved faintly. Not a smile, but something softer. "They told me," he said. "The sect. They thought it was amusing. The civilian caretaker, who asked too many questions, traveled too far, refused to accept polite refusals." Heat rushed to my face. "So you knew all along?" "Yes." "And you didn't come sooner?" The air darkened. Not visibly, but the temperature dropped, shadows lengthening unnaturally at the edges of the clearing. "I couldn't," he said quietly. "Not until I was strong enough that no one could stop me from leaving again." A chill ran down my spine. "Strong enough to do what?" His eyes locked onto mine. "To return to you," he said simply. My breath caught. Years of distance, uncertainty, grief. All of it compressed into the space between us, fragile and overwhelming. "You really came back," I whispered. His expression softened in a way that transformed him completely, stripping away the terrifying aura and revealing something achingly familiar beneath. I told you I would, he said. And then, almost like a confession torn free after years of restraint, I never stopped wanting to. Before I could process that, he pulled me into an embrace. Not tentative, not polite, desperate. His arms wrapped around me with crushing force, lifting me slightly off the ground as if he needed absolute certainty that I was there, solid, alive, not another dream that would dissolve when he woke. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, not from pain, from the sheer intensity of it. His face buried against my shoulder, breath hot and uneven against my neck. Do you know, he said hoarsely, how many times I imagined this? My hands hovered uncertainly before settling against his back. I imagined it too. His grip tightened further. Then don't disappear, he murmured. Not again. I didn't disappear. You weren't there. I couldn't be. A shudder ran through him. I know. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright. Not with tears, but with something far more dangerous. Possession. Relief. Hunger for closeness that had gone unfed for far too long. You're coming with me, he said. The words weren't a command. Not quite. But they weren't really a question either. Coming where? Anywhere that isn't here. I blinked. You just got back. Yes. And now you're leaving again? Not alone this time. My heart stumbled. Mingshen. He stepped closer, gaze unwavering. I spent 5 years in a place where everything was cold, controlled, and watched, he said quietly. The only thing that kept me from losing myself was the thought that you were still somewhere in the world. His voice dropped lower. If I leave you behind now, I don't trust myself to survive it again. The raw honesty hit like a physical blow. You don't have to survive alone anymore, I said softly. Something in his expression broke open completely. Relief, joy, and a depth of devotion so intense it made my pulse race. Then come with me, he said, almost pleading now despite the power radiating from him. Stay with me. Let me protect you this time. Chapter 7, the one I came back for. Mingshen didn't release me immediately. Even after the first crushing embrace loosened, his hands remained on my shoulders, as if afraid that if he let go completely, I might vanish again the way I had 5 years ago. Not by choice, but by force. Up close, the differences were overwhelming. He was no longer the fragile child who barely reached my chest. Now he stood close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. The breadth of his shoulders blocked the light, casting us both in shadow. Power clung to him like heat from a forge, subtle but impossible to ignore. And yet, his fingers were trembling. You're staring, he said quietly. So are you. A faint, almost disbelieving smile touched his mouth. I waited a long time to be allowed to. Something about the way he said it made my pulse skip. I became acutely aware of how close we were standing, of his hand still resting against my arm, of the warmth seeping through the fabric where our bodies nearly touched. 5 years ago, physical closeness had been ordinary, comforting, protective, innocent. Now it felt charged, unfamiliar, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with power. You should sit, I said, more to break the tension than from any real concern. You just crossed half the sky. I didn't come here to rest. Then what did you come for? The question slipped out before I could soften it. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just a slight sharpening like a blade turning to catch the light. For you, he said. My breath caught. Mingshen. I didn't cross mountains and sect boundaries and half a continent for scenery. His voice was calm, but beneath it ran something fierce and unyielding. I came because you're here. A heat spread across my chest that had nothing to do with the sun. That's not a small thing to say. It isn't meant to be small. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything that had gone unsaid for years. Wind stirred the herbs at our feet, carrying the faint scent of crushed leaves and earth. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, then fell silent again. Mingshen's gaze didn't waver. I thought about you every day, he said at last. Not dramatic, not poetic, just bare truth. At first because I was afraid you'd forget me, he continued. Then because remembering was the only thing that made the sect bearable. His jaw tightened slightly. They tried to teach me discipline, control, detachment. A humorless breath escaped him. None of it worked. Why not? He looked at me as if the answer were obvious. Because everything they wanted me to let go of led back to you. My heart stumbled hard enough to hurt. Mingshen, they told me attachment was weakness, he went on quietly. That if I wanted to master my power, I needed to sever emotional ties. His eyes darkened. I considered it. Something cold slid through my chest. You considered forgetting me? For about 3 seconds. Relief hit so suddenly it almost made me dizzy. And then I realized that if I stopped caring whether you existed, his voice dropped lower, there would be nothing left of me worth saving. The words landed like a blow. Mingshen, I said softly, you don't mean that. I do. He stepped closer, not aggressively, but deliberately, closing the last sliver of space between us. You weren't just someone who helped me, he said. You were the first person who looked at me and didn't see a weapon or a disaster waiting to happen. His hand lifted slightly, hovering again near my face, restrained by sheer will. You taught me how to be human. My throat tightened. You would have figured that out eventually. No, he said immediately. Not without you. His gaze dropped briefly to my lips, then flicked back up as if he'd caught himself doing something dangerous. The movement sent a sudden, inexplicable rush of heat through me. I became painfully aware of how uneven my breathing had become. You should stop looking at me like that, I said before I could think better of it. Like what? Like I faltered, searching for the word. Important. Something fierce flashed across his face. You are important. No, I mean, you're the most important person in my world. My pulse roared in my ears. That's not something you should say lightly. I'm not saying it lightly. He took another step forward. There was nowhere left to retreat without making it obvious. I didn't come back out of gratitude, he said, voice roughening slightly. Or obligation. Or nostalgia. His eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. I came back because I couldn't stand a world where you weren't beside me. The air felt suddenly too thin. Mingshen. Yes. What are you saying? For the first time since he arrived, uncertainty flickered across his face. Not weakness, but the tension of someone stepping onto ground that mattered more than any battlefield. I'm saying, he said slowly, that somewhere between the day you bandaged my hands and the night they took me away, you became my home. My chest tightened painfully. And when they removed me from that home, he continued, voice quieter now, I spent 5 years trying to figure out how to survive without it. His gaze softened, almost unbearably so. I failed. Something inside me gave way. That's not failure, I said hoarsely. That's grief. Call it what you like. His hand finally moved. Not to my face this time, but to my wrist, fingers wrapping gently yet firmly around it. Grounding, claiming, seeking reassurance all at once. I don't want to live like that again, he said. The contact sent a shock up my arm, not painful but startling in its intensity. His thumb brushed lightly against my pulse point, as if feeling the rapid beat beneath the skin. His eyes darkened at the sensation. You're nervous, he murmured. Anyone would be. Because of my power? I shook my head before I realized I was doing it. No. Understanding dawned slowly across his features. Not arrogance. Not smugness. Something warmer. Something almost hopeful. Then tell me, he said softly, stepping even closer, voice lowering to something intimate and dangerous. Is it because of me? I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know. Because saying it out loud would change everything. His grip on my wrist loosened, sliding down until our hands rested palm to palm. He didn't interlace our fingers, just held them there, giving me the choice to pull away. I didn't. A slow breath left him, shaky with relief. I was afraid, he admitted. Not of enemies. Not of failing to escape the sect. His eyes met mine, unguarded. I was afraid I would come back and discover that what I felt only existed on my side. The vulnerability in his voice made my chest ache. Mingshen, I know you cared about me, he said quickly, as if afraid I might soften the truth. You saved me. You protected me. You stayed when everyone else left. His gaze searched my face with painful intensity. But caring for a child isn't the same as... He stopped, jaw tightening. Not the same as what? I asked gently. He swallowed once. Not the same as loving a man. Silence fell. Heavy. Fragile. Irreversible. I realized my hand had tightened around his without conscious thought. He noticed too. Hope flickered like a spark catching dry tinder. I didn't want to assume, he continued quietly. You deserve the freedom to choose your own life. If you tell me you don't feel the same, I will leave. The words were steady, but his fingers trembled. I won't force you. The idea of him leaving again felt like a physical wound. You think it would be that easy? I said softly. For you. A faint, sad smile touched his mouth. I hope so. I stepped forward instead of back. Close enough that I could feel his breath. Close enough that retreat would now be deliberate. When you disappeared, I said, voice unsteady despite my effort to control it, I kept expecting to hear your footsteps outside, or see you waiting by the gate. I told myself I wasn't hoping, just prepared. His eyes widened slightly. But every day you didn't come back, I continued. The house felt emptier, too quiet, too big. My grip on his hand tightened. I thought I had simply gotten used to taking care of you, that I missed the routine. And now, he asked hoarsely. I looked up at him fully. Now I realize it wasn't the routine I missed. My heart pounded painfully. It was you. Something broke in his expression. Not weakness, but overwhelming emotion finally allowed to surface. Mingshen, I said softly. I don't know when it changed. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it happened the moment you stepped out of the sky and looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. My free hand lifted, hesitating only a moment before resting against his chest, over the rapid beat of his heart. But you're not a child anymore, I continued, and what I feel now isn't what I felt then. He covered my hand with his immediately, pressing it more firmly against his heart as if anchoring himself. Then what do you feel? He whispered. I swallowed, nerves and something far warmer tangling together. I feel like if you leave again, it will hurt in a way I won't recover from. His breath shuddered. That sounds dangerously close to love. I met his gaze steadily. It probably is. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he leaned down slowly, giving me plenty of time to pull away. I didn't. His forehead rested against mine, echoing the gesture from years ago. But this time there was nothing childlike about it. Heat radiated between us, breath mingling, tension coiling tight enough to snap. I love you, he said quietly. Not dramatic, not hesitant, certain. I didn't come back for gratitude. I didn't come back for closure. His voice roughened. I came back because I want a life with you, not beside you as a protector, not above you as something powerful. His hand tightened around mine. Equal. Together. If you'll have me. My eyes stung. You crossed half the world just to say that? I crossed half the world because I couldn't not say it. Emotion surged too fast to contain. I closed the last fraction of distance, wrapping my arms around him this time, pressing my face into his shoulder the way he had done earlier. Yes, I said into the fabric of his robe. I'll have you. He froze. Then his arms came around me with overwhelming force, lifting me completely off the ground in a fierce, almost disbelieving embrace. You're sure? He murmured against my hair. Yes. You're not afraid? Of you. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Never. Relief crashed through him so visibly it was almost frightening. He buried his face briefly against my neck, breathing in deeply like someone finally allowed air after years underwater. "Then I'm not letting you go," he said. Morning arrived quietly. For the first time in 5 years, I woke to the sound of breathing that wasn't my own. Mingshen had insisted on sleeping on the floor. Not because there wasn't space, the bed was large enough for two, but because, as he put it with awkward seriousness, "If I lie beside you, I won't sleep." At the time I had assumed he meant excitement, lingering tension from the confession, or simply unfamiliarity with the small house. Now, watching him from the edge of the bed, I suspected something else entirely. He was not curled up like a human sleeper. He lay on his back, perfectly still, one arm thrown over his eyes as if even in sleep he was shielding himself from the world. The blanket had been kicked aside sometime during the night. Dark hair spilled across the mat like ink, and faint black markings pulsed slowly along his exposed collarbone. Subtle, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Power signatures. Not unstable. Just immense. As if sensing my gaze, his fingers twitched. Then his arm lowered. Golden eyes opened immediately, clear and alert. Not the slightest trace of sleep. Demons didn't drift between states the way humans did. They woke ready. "You're staring again," he murmured, voice rough with disuse rather than fatigue. "I just woke up. And your first instinct was to check whether I was still here." It wasn't a question. I felt heat rise to my face. "Maybe." Something unbearably soft flickered across his expression. "I like that," he said quietly. He sat up in one smooth motion, movements too precise to be entirely human. Even after everything, there were moments when his otherness showed. Not frightening, just unmistakable. The blanket slid from his shoulders, revealing the faint network of dark markings spreading across his skin like shadows trapped beneath the surface. I must have stared because he followed my gaze. "Ah," he said, without embarrassment, without self-consciousness, only careful observation of my reaction. "I forgot humans aren't used to seeing demon sigils this clearly." "They weren't there before," I said slowly. "They were." He tilted his head. "You simply couldn't see them." I frowned. "Why not?" "Because I was suppressing most of my power back then." His mouth curved faintly. "And because I hadn't completed maturation." "Maturation," I repeated. He considered how to explain, then shifted closer to the bed, resting his arms on the mattress. "In demon physiology, early development isn't linear like it is for humans," he said. "We remain in a partially dormant state until our core stabilizes." "That sounds dangerous." "It is." His gaze softened slightly. "I was close to destabilizing when you found me." A chill ran through me. 5 human years, he continued, is not equivalent to 5 demon years, especially for high blood demons. Once stabilization begins, growth accelerates rapidly. He lifted one hand, studying it as if it belonged to someone else. "What you saw back then was closer to an early adolescent form. Not a true child." That explained a lot. His height even then, his strength, the unsettling intelligence behind his eyes. "And now?" I asked quietly. "Now I'm fully matured." He met my gaze, something dark and warm flickering beneath the calm surface. "In every sense." My pulse jumped for no good reason. He seemed to notice. A slow, knowing smile appeared. Not teasing, not predatory, just deeply pleased. "You don't need to worry," he added gently. "Demon maturation doesn't erase emotional bonds formed earlier. If anything, it intensifies them. That's reassuring." "It should be." His voice lowered slightly. "Because what I feel for you now is not a child's attachment." The room suddenly felt too small. Before I could respond, his expression shifted, sharpening as if he'd sensed something beyond the walls. "Someone is approaching." A knock sounded at the gate seconds later. It was old Madame Chun from the neighboring farm. She had brought vegetables, as she sometimes did, and a long list of complaints about her grandchildren. She stopped mid-sentence the moment Mingshen stepped into view behind me. "Oh," she said faintly. Her eyes widened, then widened more. then locked onto him as if trying to determine whether he was real. To be fair, he did look unreal. Tall, composed, radiating quiet authority, golden eyes catching the morning light like molten metal. Even his stillness felt deliberate, like a coiled force pretending to be human out of politeness. "And who," she asked slowly, "is this young man?" Mingshen didn't answer immediately. He glanced at me instead, waiting. Something in my chest tightened. "He's family," I said. The effect was immediate. His posture softened. Not visibly to anyone else, but I felt it, like tension releasing from a drawn bowstring. "Family," Madame Chun repeated skeptically. "You never mentioned a son." "He's not my son." "Brother." I hesitated. Mingshen stepped forward before I could find a safe answer. "I'm the one he was waiting for," he said calmly. Madame Chun blinked. "Waiting for?" "For 5 years," he added. Silence. Then her gaze snapped to me with the kind of intensity usually reserved for scandal. "Oh," she said again, but this time it carried an entirely different meaning. I wanted the ground to swallow me. When she finally left, after extracting several promises to explain everything later, I closed the gate with a sigh. This village is going to talk. They already were, Mingshen said mildly. I turned. "You knew. I'm not deaf." He stepped closer, expression thoughtful rather than annoyed. "I don't mind." "You don't mind rumors?" "Not if they connect us." That heat again, sudden, disorienting. He reached out, fingers brushing lightly against my sleeve, then sliding down to my wrist. Not gripping, not restraining, just there, grounding himself. "Humans rely heavily on social acknowledgement," he said quietly. "If they perceive us as a pair, they are less likely to interfere. That's a very strategic way to look at it. It's also honest." His thumb traced one slow arc over my pulse. "I don't want anyone thinking you're single. You're too handsome. There's a lot of girls eyeing you." My breath caught. "Mingshen." His eyes darkened slightly, something fierce flickering beneath the softness. "I left you unprotected once," he said. "I won't do it again." Later, I discovered demons were terrible at domestic tasks. Not unwilling, just profoundly inexperienced. "You're holding the knife wrong," I said for the third time. "I'm holding it efficiently. You're holding it like you're about to interrogate the vegetables." He frowned at the cucumber as if it had personally offended him. "I have never prepared food before." "That's obvious." He adjusted his grip with visible care. For someone who could probably split mountains, he handled the knife like a fragile artifact, moving with painstaking slowness. The result was uneven slices that looked more crushed than cut. "This is harder than combat training," he admitted. I laughed despite myself. "That's because the vegetables aren't trying to kill you. That would make this much simpler." Something warm settled in my chest. 5 years ago, I had taught him how to hold chopsticks. Now I was teaching him how to slice cucumbers. Somehow it felt like time had looped rather than passed. He seemed to feel it too. "These small things," he said quietly, not looking up from his task, "are what I missed the most." I paused. "Not freedom, not power. I had those." He finally lifted his gaze. "I didn't have this." That evening, we sat outside as the sky darkened, the air cooling into something soft and gentle. Mingshen leaned back against the wall, one knee drawn up, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. Not guarded, not restrained, simply present. "Are you happy?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached over and took my hand, threading our fingers together this time without hesitation. The contact felt natural, right? "Yes," he said at last. Then, after a brief pause, "But not because everything is perfect." He turned his head slightly, golden eyes catching the lantern light. "I'm happy because you're here. That's enough." As night deepened, a chill crept into the air. Without a word, he shifted closer, draping his outer robe around my shoulders before settling beside me. The movement was smooth, instinctive, protective without being suffocating. "You'll get cold," I protested weakly. "I won't. That's not the point." "It is to me." He rested his head lightly against mine, not trapping me, just sharing warmth. "If you're comfortable," he murmured. "I'm comfortable." After a moment, he added softly, "I like being this close." My heart did something embarrassingly unsteady. "Me too." His hand tightened slightly around mine, relief flowing through the bond like warmth. Far above us, the stars burned bright and steady. For the first time in years, the world felt quiet in a way that wasn't empty, just peaceful.